Good morning from the Freedom of Information and Privacy Association. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, and this is your Access and Privacy Online News Summary for Saturday, April 5th. And we are entering week 3 of the federal election here in Canada. On the radar this week, police record keeping and the growing role of AI both inside and outside the courtroom. 2 scandals involving taxpayer dollars and questions of political accountability. Updates on environmental topics shaped by access to information. Broader stories from Canada, the United States, and abroad, and a reminder about how your personal data, including DNA, can be affected when a company goes bankrupt. We've got a lot to cover, so let's dive in. We start with a piece that highlights how law enforcement agencies nationwide are ramping up AI capabilities to predict and respond to criminal activity. The critical issue is the potential compromise of civilian data as police integrate increasingly sophisticated surveillance software systems. One example of AI being used to fight criminal activity is to combat AI being used to generate child sexual abuse material. This is causing an arms race between law enforcement agencies and criminals, and that means putting guardrails in place is even more important. Like FIPA, privacy advocates, including our friends at the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, caution that, unless transparent policies are in place, public trust and individual rights could be at stake. As we look at the use of these systems, we also see the conversation shifts to the judicial system, where AI-generated evidence or AI-assisted decision-making tools may soon influence court proceedings. Critics argue that algorithmic bias, AI hallucination, and a lack of due process could undermine fair trials. BC is ground zero in this, with a proven problem back in 2023 when a Vancouver-based family court lawyer was reading citations created by AI. However, these citations were made-up hallucinations by ChatGPT. Proponents believe it might streamline the system, but everyone agrees. Robust oversight and clarity on how these tools work are vital. Some courts, including those in Alberta and Quebec, have a so-called human-in-the-loop rule that AI-generated submissions must be verified by someone, while many require declarations if AI is used to prepare submissions. As we consider the use of AI systems in policing and justice, a lot of these factors are influenced by information management. Michelle Dory-Forstell, LGI reporter at thekingstonist.com, provides a glimpse into how one police force manages vast amounts of data, from incident records to surveillance footage. In Kingston, the police service relies on a group of employees working together and supporting one another. The employees include the records manager, and then 5 distinct groups working beneath them. These groups consist of the front desk, records counter, criminal records, Canadian Police Information Center, or CPIC, and alarms/freedom of information. The details raise important questions about long-term data retention and public transparency. As AI continues to intertwine with law enforcement, ensuring both effectiveness and accountability remains front and center. Now, let's turn to 2 Canadian political scandals that continue to raise eyebrows. In Alberta, questions continue about confidentiality and proper management of sensitive information. Alberta Health Services alleges a former CEO retained privileged correspondence pertaining to allegations in a high-profile court case, sparking a legal battle. AHS discovered last week that the former CEO had forwarded nearly a dozen emails from her work account to a personal email address the day before she was fired. The former CEO is suing the Alberta government and AHS for wrongful dismissal, alleging she was illegally fired to stop her from investigating sweetheart deals and high-level political interference in multi-million-dollar health procurement contracts. The follow underscores how quickly access to information disputes can become legal showdowns. Meanwhile, in Ontario, from Ed Smith, LGI reporter at The Pointer. FOI requests reveal that the City of St. Catharines' resources, including city property and staff time, was used for an event connected to Premier Doug Ford's campaign, an apparent breach of municipal rules and election contributions. The documents show that the mayor either canceled or moved meetings related to his commitments as mayor to attend Ford's political campaign event, which was not a Government of Ontario function. This case is an important reminder that transparency and accountability in municipal spending remain vital to public trust. From accountability in government to how climate change is being addressed through policy and information sharing, let's see how access to information is shaping environmental discourse. From Maggie McIntosh, LGI reporter at the Winnipeg Free Press. A local school division is proactively crafting a climate action plan, informed by data on emissions, energy use, and environmental impact. Its climate action plan is being organized by a team of roughly 25 people, ranging from students to trustees, who want to align the division with climate scientists' recommendations. Their work has begun with a baseline greenhouse gas inventory and the distribution of school surveys to get a sense of existing infrastructure challenges and environmental initiatives. Accessing this information helps educational leaders tailor policies that engage students and communities in sustainable practices. From Jacqueline St. Pierre, LGI reporter at the Manitoulin Expositor. Newly released documents shed light on a municipal association's continued support for glyphosate, a controversial herbicide. 61 new scientific studies to Health Canada highlight previously unidentified or heightened risks linked to glyphosate, resulting in a recent federal court ruling which found Health Canada's previous safety review of glyphosate to be unreasonable. Despite this, the Manitoulin Municipal Association has opted not to ban the herbicide. Meanwhile, farmers argue that regulation is an issue, as they have strict regulations related to the herbicide, but anyone else can buy it with ease. While cost-effectiveness is often cited, critics argue transparency on health and environmental impacts is essential for informed public debate. And in continued coverage from Matt Simmons, LGI reporter, and Zach Becerra at the Narwhal, in collaboration with the Investigative Journalism Foundation, documents obtained under Freedom of Information legislation reveal regulatory leniency for some environmental polluters, raising the stakes on how much the public knows about potential hazards. In 2020, the BC Energy Regulator, then called the BC Oil and Gas Commission, exempted more than 4,300 pipelines operated by Canadian Natural Resources Limited from the 18th-month decommissioning requirements. Major gas producers often operate hundreds or thousands of short pipelines that connect wells to larger pipeline networks that transport natural gas to buyers. When the wells dry up, those pipelines are no longer needed. BC law requires inactive pipelines to be fully decommissioned 18 months after they become inactive to prevent environmental damage and leaks as pipelines gradually decay. Environmental groups suggest that without proper disclosure, public oversight is nearly impossible, reminding us how vital FOI laws can be in holding industry and government accountable. Access to information is key to informed decision-making, not just in environmental policy, but in everyday governance. Let's move on to more general stories on privacy and information across Canada. After stakeholder concerns surfaced, Premier Eby has revised a tariff bill to address privacy and fairness issues. Eby said the province has emergency authority to respond to natural disasters, and he wanted to have a similar response to actions by U.S. President Donald Trump. However, he said a key portion of the law is being pulled, which would originally have given the cabinet sweeping powers to make regulations to address challenges, quote, arising from the actions of a foreign jurisdiction, end quote. It's a reminder that transparency can prompt policy shifts before they become law. From Abigail Popple, LGI reporter at the Rocky Mountain Goat. A local budget plan in Valemount includes funding for a columbrium and economic recovery initiatives. Access to the budgeting process allows residents to understand how tax dollars are allocated, ensuring community priorities are considered. Additionally, the budget includes a $10,000 item to hire a summer student who can sort through the village's physical documents. According to the presentation, this likely puts the village in violation of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, specifically the section that obligates public bodies to respond to Freedom of Information requests and destroy personal records after a certain period. As an aside, columbrium is our word of the week. If you're wondering, it's a place to store cremated remains in a cemetery. From Cal Braid, LGI reporter at the Taber Times. A cybersecurity breach on Power School back in January has prompted free protective services to affected parties. Power School said it's engaged 2 trusted credit reporting agencies to offer 2 years of complimentary identity protection services for all students and educators whose information was involved. The offer will include 2 years of complimentary credit monitoring services for those affected and are 18 years old. This underscores how timely disclosure and remedial measures can help build trust when personal or organizational data is compromised. And from AP Antonacci, LGI reporter at the Hamilton Spectator, a startling example of online fraud saw one resident lose tens of thousands of dollars to a cryptocurrency scheme. The Ontario Provincial Police highlights that early reporting and public awareness are essential in preventing these crimes. To avoid being scammed, police suggest residents do their homework before investing to make sure the opportunity is legitimate. Residents should not share personal information with people they do not know, and use skepticism when evaluating offers promising risk-free returns. You can learn more about fraud and cybercrime by calling the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre at 1-888-495-8501 or visiting their website. That phone number again is 1-888-495-8501. From Canadian communities to the broader stage, let's look at significant developments in the United States, where access and privacy continue to be high-stakes topics. We have a cluster of stories shedding light on legal challenges to executive powers and possible breaches of constitutional norms. The lawsuits raise concerns that federal policies and executive orders might undermine election transparency and fair process as Trump muses about seeking a third term. There are now multiple stories providing examples where Americans are turning on and reporting people they disagree with, including neighbors, to authorities for deportation. When a protester was caught on video in January at a New York rally against Israel, only her eyes were visible between a mask and headscarf. Days later, photos of her entire face, along with her name and employer, were circulated online. A right-wing Jewish group said it is now using facial recognition software to identify campus protesters and included them on a list submitted to administration officials seeking deportation. Both pieces expose how private organizations are gathering and sharing personal data on student protesters. The risk to privacy and due process is enormous, particularly for international students who can now face deportation without adequate legal recourse. There remain multiple stories indicating the shifting landscape of public policy in the U.S., from job cuts affecting pandemic response to the temporary suspension of controversial transgender restrictions. Employees across the massive U.S. Health and Human Services Department receive notices that their jobs are being eliminated, part of a sweeping overhaul designed to vastly shrink the agencies responsible for protecting and promoting Americans' health. The cuts include researchers, scientists, doctors, support staff, and senior leaders, leaving the federal government without many of the key experts who have long guided U.S. decisions on medical research, drug approvals, and other issues. In more positive news, a judge temporarily blocked a Montana law that restricts transgender people's use of bathrooms in public buildings. The judge's order will be in effect at least until an April 21st hearing on whether it should continue to be blocked while a lawsuit over the law moves ahead. All raise questions about transparency, oversight, and balancing public interest with individual rights. To wrap up in the U.S., while the dissemination of classified information at the highest levels and use of off-book decision-making mechanisms to avoid the official record are the new norm, Attorney General Pam Bondi is indicating a criminal probe into the Signal chat is unlikely despite a long history of similar inquiries. She repeated Trump administration talking points that the highly sensitive information in the chat was not classified. Despite that, current and former U.S. officials have said the posting of the exact launch times of aircraft and times that bombs will be released before those pilots were even in the air would have been classified. The piece highlights that, although authorities have often launched investigations into encrypted messaging platforms, no such criminal probe into Signal appears imminent. Crossing the Atlantic, we see similar themes of data privacy, governance, and sometimes royalty in the headlines. France's antitrust watchdog is fining Apple over app tracking in a story that underscores growing tensions between tech giants and regulators over user tracking. The 150 million euros fine comes from a privacy feature protecting users from apps snooping on them because its introduction resulted in abuse of competition law. The French Competition Authority said the aim of Apple's app tracking transparency, requiring iPhone and iPad apps to ask users for permission before tracking them, was not in itself open to criticism. While a significant ruling, the fine is largely symbolic, given the amount is a pittance for the iPhone maker, which earned $124 billion in revenue in the final 3 months of last year. Next, we see medical privacy meeting public curiosity as a story reveals King Charles III's brief hospital stay is reminding the United Kingdom that the monarch is still a cancer patient. Palace officials have recognized that it's better to release some information about the king's health rather than allow media speculation to fill the void when he's forced to cancel scheduled events. This diverges from the past, where health issues with the royal family were kept under wraps, like Queen Elizabeth II, who, at the end of her life, royal officials repeatedly said that she was suffering from mobility issues. But they have tried to walk a fine line, seeking to balance the public's legitimate interest in the health of the head of state with Charles' right to privacy. And in other royal news, in a claim that potentially puts a spotlight on reputational management and crisis communications, an African charities chair alleges bullying by Prince Harry. The chairperson said Prince Harry tried to force her out as she pushed back following his abrupt resignation from the organization. It said she had tried to blow the whistle on abuse of power, bullying, harassment, misogyny, and misogynoir, the latter word referring to a combination of racism and misogyny directed towards black women. She said he had also interfered with her whistleblower complaint. The now public debate raises the question of how personal conduct, image control, and organizational confidentiality intersects on the global stage. Finally, let's discuss the important issue of what happens to your personal information, especially genetic data, when a company goes bankrupt. As 23andMe faces bankruptcy, consumer genetic and survey data could be part of its assets. The concern is that in liquidation or restructuring, sensitive personal information may change hands without user consent. Concerns arise over the possibility of law enforcement using genetic data obtained through the corporation in court cases. There are also concerns of discrimination from insurance companies and potential employers if someone is at high risk of developing a genetic disease or disorder. In relation to 23andMe's bankruptcy, the BC Office of Information and Privacy Commissioner has put out a release that underscores Canadians can exercise their rights to request data deletion or confirm how their information is being handled. 23andMe also has an option to adjust the settings to choose whether or not customers wish to participate in research and share their data or participate in biobanking. This is a timely reminder that it is important to know your rights whenever a service you use faces major financial or legal changes. As we enter week 3 of the federal election campaign, we want to remind folks to subscribe to our email list. FIPA is distributing its election questionnaire to leaders and candidates, along with a guide filled with practical info on ensuring access and privacy issues are on the electoral radar. Plus, we want to highlight to our listeners that the BC OIPC will be holding 7 public consultations in May to gather public feedback as part of the office's strategic planning process. The commissioner will host public forums in Prince George, Smithers, Victoria, Kamloops, Kelowna, Abbotsford, and Vancouver. See dates and times for each location below. You can find a link to the release in our show notes or on the OIPC website. We hope these stories help you stay informed about the latest issues surrounding privacy, information management, and public transparency. To help us keep the mics on, please subscribe to FIPA News Monitoring or consider making a donation. Our writer is Sean Fisk. Original music today was composed by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, your host and producer. Thank you for joining. A big FIPA thank you to all the contributors, reporters, and outlets that make this podcast possible, and to you, our listeners, who keep it thriving. Stay safe and stay informed.